CGW Industry Insider Podcast Series. I'm Kendra Ruczak, the managing editor of CGW Magazine. I'm very excited to be kicking off our new VFX Masters Series with two very special guests from AMD, James Knight and Andy Parma. Welcome to the podcast, James. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Can you tell us a little bit about your title and role at AMD?
Well, for myself, I am Global Media and Entertainment Director at AMD, and that involves visual effects and virtual production as well. And I've been at AMD for about 7 years, and in film and post-production, etc., for about 22 or so.
Excellent. And welcome to the podcast, Andy. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so I'm AMD's director of the MNC Workstation processor business. So what that really means is I work with Dell, HP, and Lenovo for building workstations based on AMD's Threadripper Pro, Ryzen Pro desktop, and Ryzen Pro mobile processors. So there's an ecosystem of desktop workstations based on the Ryzen Pro processors and the Threadripper Pro processors, as well as a number of mobile workstations that use our Ryzen Pro processors.
Excellent. So James, can you tell us a little bit more about your professional background and what led you to AMD?
Well, what led me to AMD? I've been in the virtual production community, I guess, when I first moved to LA back in 2006 or so. And I got introduced to AMD in 2015. And then I knew we were redoing the architecture of our CPUs. So around 2017 is when it really kicked into high gear. And they wanted me to lead their media and entertainment efforts in as far as post-production and visual effects goes. And I've worked on films and games. I'm involved in the Visual Effects Society, been a member of that for a while, and BAFTA and AMPAS, the Academy. And so professionally, I'm very much still involved in film and content creation. And so I suppose in a way I'm one of them, but I also speak AMDese, if that makes any sense. So I feel like it's a great bridge, and I think what AMD is bringing to media and entertainment, I understand what it means, and I understand the plight of filmmakers and visual effects artists. So I think like my background really helps in my role. But Andy's got the coolest job because he's the one who's in charge of Threadripper and Ryzen and a lot of our CPUs. So when we come up with something new, he's the one that gets the phone call. Hey man, can you hook me up with a Ryzen? Can you hook me up with a Threadripper? But that's a bit about me.
Oh, great. So Andy, let's jump over to you and hear a little bit about your professional background and your path to AMD.
Sure. So I've been in the tech business for about 25 years at this point, and I really started getting involved in the workstation business back in 2015 when I actually was working for Intel. I was working in Intel's workstation business at that point in time. And then in 2019, I transitioned into the current role that I've got leading the MNC workstation business. So again, relying on prior engineering experiences that I had and other experiences in the semiconductor industry and bringing all those insights into what we're doing with Threadripper Pro and Ryzen Pro for the last 3 years or so.
Top visual effects studios are relying on AMD's technology to complete a vast array of projects and content across the globe. What led to AMD becoming a leader in this industry?
I think one of the things that when people think innovation, they think mainly just technology, and it's not. It's innovation and a conversation. It's a technology and a conversation. So it's relationships. It's a feedback loop. So if I'm honest, what led to it, the beginning was us having a really good piece of technology in our compute, in re-architecturing our CPUs back in 2016, 2017. But what really helped was what led us was a combination of the technology being great and our relationships, people that Andy knew, people that I knew from previous lives. I think that really helped. And then having that consistent feedback loop with the major studios, artists, directors, that kind of thing has really led us to become the leaders in compute when it comes to visual effects and production and post-production. From my mind, Andy, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my experience is really similar. So it was about 5 years ago that from a technology standpoint, AMD came out with the first Ryzen processors, and that really set a new bar for product performance. And so that got the attention of a lot of people within the media and entertainment industry. But we've paired that with something that's really unique to AMD is that we've got a lot of people inside the company that have experience within the media and entertainment and visual effects industry, right? You know, James kind of talked about his background. We've got other people within the company that have similar backgrounds that have been working in the industry in Hollywood and in other, you know, hot spots for the entertainment industry that can really, you know, not just talk about what's unique about AMD's technologies and products, but talk to our customers and partners about how that technology can benefit them in a way that makes sense to them, right? Where we're not talking about, you know, gigahertz and nanometers and the things that we live and breathe every day at AMD, but the ways that our technology can really benefit people that are in the industry.
Excellent. Could you dive more into the Ryzen Threadripper line and tell us about how these processors are ideal for visual effects work?
Yeah, so the most recent member of the Threadripper Pro line, we call it the Threadripper Pro 5000 series. We introduced it earlier this year, and the thing that is really unique about Threadripper Pro is not just it's got our high performance cores that we call the Zen architecture of cores, but we scale up to the highest core count in the industry. So with up to 64 of these Zen cores in a single processor, our customers can do things that they haven't been able to do before. And what we've seen over the last, you know, 2 or 3 years, these new workflows and usage models have just really accelerated during the pandemic, the way that people have been creating film and entertainment. A lot of these trends were already happening, but they've really accelerated as all of a sudden, instead of, you know, working remotely became a nice concept, it became, you know, something that was absolutely mandatory. Right? So things like virtual production, things like using technologies like ILM Stagecraft technology that they used to make The Mandalorian. These technology trends were happening, but again, over the last 3 years or so, they've really accelerated it, and all these new usage models really take advantage of the high core count and high performance of Threadripper Pro.
I agree with Andy. The unintended consequence of the pandemic kicked in working from home into high gear, and also virtual production into high gear. You know, limiting the amount of people on a stage and making something look more fantastical than it would have been necessarily beforehand. But you've got a large amount of compute, a small footprint with a smaller crew, and I think a large amount of compute and a small footprint is definitely something we got really good at. And then we had many visual effects artists, professionals, even some directors finish some films at home with Threadripper Pro under their dining room table, like 64 cores in one system's pretty insane. So I knew that it had an effect from that perspective as well. It's given artists sort of a mini render farm under their desks.
Wow. And to add to that, how does AMD give artists more time with their art?
Well, just that. I mean, with more cores and threads, you have more chance to iterate, to revise your art. Of course, it's an expanding sandbox. It's give and take, because the minute we come out with a 64 core Threadripper Pro, then a few weeks later someone goes, I know what I'll do with even more cores. So it's give and take. But I think overwhelmingly it's working with what we call the ISVs, independent software vendors, the Adobes and the Autodesks of the world, and Epic Games of the world, where we are optimizing for more cores and threads, and so artists can share assets much easier between applications if you have a large amount of compute in a small footprint. I think that really helps too. Is you can make a lot more decisions in a small period of time.
Excellent. And Andy, from your perspective, how does AMD's technology, especially Threadripper, allow artists to spend more time on creative pursuits?
Yeah, I mean, so the thing that's easy to quantify with numbers is rendering, right? There's a lot of key software that artists use where rendering is a key aspect of that. And as James and I go talk to customers routinely, we see customers that say, when I used my first Threadripper Pro, it cut my render time in half compared to the system that I had been using. But the thing that's less, quantifiable with numbers or benchmarks that really does have a big impact on Threadripper Pro is that as people work through their production workflow, they use Boris FX, they use Adobe After Effects, other software in their workflow. The ability to just go from one application to the next and keep all those open is something you just can't do with a lower performance processor. And a lot of times when we talk to artists that are evaluating Threadripper Pro for the first time, they don't even realize what they did, and we kind of have to sit back and say, so what you did is you'd open this application and you used it. As soon as it finished, you open this next one, you open this next one. Is that something you usually do? And they think about it, they go, well, no, what I used to have to do with my old processor was finish one application, shut it all down, open the new one, reload everything. So just that ability to stay in the creative flow is something really unique that Threadripper Pro offers to artists.
Wow. I'd love to dive more into remote workflows since they become such an essential part of visual effects pipelines. Can you tell us more about how AMD's technology is ideal for visual effects artists who are working remotely?
Yeah, sure. We've been working with, I'd say, many of there's some things you can and cannot say, but we've been working with many of most of the big studios, I would say, and a lot of the cloud service providers, and working with them with our EPYC CPUs, EPYC. Those are the name of our server CPUs. So if you have one of those or Threadripper in the data center, typically what makes them ideal for VFX artists is efficiency, in as far as you can have up to 128 cores in one single system, EPYC CPUs, and a lot of visual effects companies, post-production companies want to split up the artists and give them 16 cores per artist, which is easy to do on a 164 core CPU. So you could put 4 artists on one system. That's ideal. And then let's say you have a VFX supervisor or a senior artist that wants all 64 cores remote. We have our server CPUs and Threadripper in the data center in data centers all over the world. So they seem to be very useful for visual effects artists remote. So they can, like Andy was saying earlier, keep applications open, share assets between those. And I referenced earlier too, constant iteration. Even on the cloud, you're just bound by your internet, your internet band speed as far as any latency goes. But I think from that perspective, they are very beneficial for VFX artists working remotely, and also from the graphics perspective, whether you're using NVIDIA GPUs or AMD GPUs, you can go denser with our server CPUs than you could with any other CPU, i.e. you can have more GPUs attached to one CPU than any other CPU.
Great. And Andy, what have you seen from your perspective in terms of remote workflows?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've really seen is that with the combination of Threadripper Pro and EPYC technologies, we really allow our customers to work the way that they want to work. So some customers will stay on a high performance laptop and remote in to a Threadripper Pro based workstations. So they get the performance of a Threadripper Pro, but the portability of a laptop. Others will want to have the Threadripper Pro based workstation under their desk and have that working locally. Others will want to put a Threadripper Pro workstation actually in the data center. We call that a rack workstation. So you got Threadripper Pro running workstation workflows, but it's actually located in the data center. or some customers will use the EPIC server processors that James works with. So, no matter how customers want to access their pipeline, we really believe that it works best on AMD. And that's why, James and I are talking together today. And when we go to talk to customers, we tell the EPIC and the Threadripper Pro story together, because really, it doesn't matter where you put your workflow, whether you want to do it on a traditional desktop workstation, a workstation in a rack, an EPIC server, wherever you put your M&E workflow, you're going to get the best performance on AMD.
Excellent. Next, I'd love to talk about virtual production and how AMD's technology is taking virtual production to new heights.
Well, that one is a good, definitely not a monosyllabic answer. We started working with virtual production in this chapter of virtual production with what was at the time Fox Visual Effects Labs with Glenn Derry and Rhea Fisher, Ryan Began, and a few other guys down there. That was kind of born out of the film Avatar, became Fox Visual Effects Labs. And they realized that right out of the box at that time, first generation Threadripper, right out of the box was 15 to 20% faster at light baking than anything else they had seen before. So that entire facility ended up being pretty much entire facility ended up being all AMD CPUs, and they had some EPIC CPUs in the data center there for photogrammetry, when they would LiDAR scan in complex geometry from environments outside, and then stitch together the high resolution photography and match it to that geometry. So then, and it kind of scaled from there. There was a couple of other instances of a similar bit of business we did with various different studios, and it kind of bled. And so virtual production was our main injection point into modern filmmaking, into where we are today. And now we've bled into rendering and delivering content, and more into previs as well. So it's disseminated out from virtual production. But from the bird's eye view, the reason why we genuinely are, it's not just marketing. Anybody who's building new LED walls or virtual production stages around the world is buying AMD CPUs to power the system. It's simply light baking or scene building and setup. So if the director comes in and says, I want the sun over here instead of over here, or this tree needs to go here, you still have to kind of render that and to be able to shoot on it with the way that some of the engines are set up. And so it just seems that there's minimal setup times, and they're able to spit out, to render sequences a ton faster with our CPUs.
Excellent.
And go dense as well. So a lot of the visual effects companies that are building these walls, whether they be an independent studio or a visual effects company, they want to go dense. We want to have more NVIDIA GPUs or more AMD GPUs powering these walls, but we have high frequency EPIC parts, 128 lanes on one CPU, or if you combine two, it's 160 lanes. So you can put a lot of GPUs inside of one system to aid powering those LED walls.
Wow. And Andy, do you have anything to add to that from your perspective?
No, I mean, the thing that I've seen as James and I have gone out to visit customers is that these virtual production sets, they're now going up all over the world, right? They're in Hollywood, they're in Vancouver, they're in Toronto, all across Europe, all across Asia Pacific, and all of these are new build outs of technology that are powered by an immense number of EPIC based servers and Threadripper Pro based workstations. And so again, I think even though we're maybe 3 to 4 years into the virtual production journey, there's a long way to go still as more and more of these stages continue to get built, and as artists think of new ways to use this technology. I know that's what's going to happen, right? As we put this technology in the hands of more and more creative people, they're going to think of new, innovative ways to use it that 3-4 years ago when we started this virtual production journey, nobody had even thought of. So the next few years are still ripe for innovation and how virtual production gets used.
That's so exciting. Are either of you able to share any examples of visual effects studios who use AMD's technology for groundbreaking projects?
Yeah, Andy and I have a few. Actually, one of the launch quotes and one of the partners that we got to, we evaled them. We got them early samples of this current generation of Threadripper Pro 5000 was Industrial Light and Magic. We actually got a quote from Nick, one of the principals in their stagecraft crew. Had a quote, and then also the visual effects supervisor of Dune. Our technology was used a lot on that film. So we've been public about that. We at the beginning of 2021 we had the CTO of Industrial Light and Magic on with our CEO. So obviously, someone can interpolate out from that we continue to innovate with the major studios. And there's more coming, but we do tend to work with I believe all of the visual effects studios and the artists.
Well, before we wrap this up, where's AMD headed in the future?
Andy knows everything. I know a little bit. Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, so one of the things that we just announced is the new AMD Ryzen 7000 series. So this is the first product using AMD's new Zen 4 cores. And so it delivers up to 62% higher performance than competitive solutions for creative applications. And so again, that was just announced. It'll be coming to market here very soon. You'll be able to buy it this fall. And then I know James has got some upcoming product announcements that we've talked about some in the Epic product line.
Yeah. There's someone can, if you go looking, you can interpolate that we have some releases at the end of the year. So yeah, I think you can see that it's public record. We have next generation Zen 4 coming to the data center, much in the same way that like similar to the ones Andy mentioned. So you can see that for yourself towards the end of the year. But I think AMD is not a company that's complacent. So I think it's safe to say that we're going to continue to noodle away and always be innovating, listening to the content creators, the producers, the artists, even the people who are managing the bottom line on a film. They obviously always want better, faster, less expensive. So AMD is always trying to balance all three and get filmmakers what they want to make their plight a little less painful. Yeah, there's some stuff coming towards the end of the year that people are genuinely going to be excited about. We found that in visual effects, no one's in it just because it's a job, right? They're really enthusiastic about technology. So what's really cool is when we have new releases, we show up at a visual effects house. People are genuinely excited to see us, which is kind of a cool thing to experience. So where are we headed in the future? It's that way, up.
Excellent. Thank you both so much for being here today. It was so wonderful to hear about how AMD is influencing the visual effects industry, and I'm so excited to see where things go from here. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me.